A 23-year-old single mother who had stolen formula stood trembling in the courtroom, charged with theft. She couldn't bring herself to look up from the defendant's stand, keeping her head bowed as the judge flipped through his documents and called her name. Defendant, Kim Seo-yeon. Her voice came out shaky and thin. Yes, I'm Kim Seo-yeon. The moment those words left her lips, the judge's hand froze mid-page. Every sound in the courtroom, the clerk's typing, the scattered coughs from the gallery vanished into absolute silence. Only the judge's eyes remained fixed on the defendant's face, unmoving, unblinking. This was a man who had presided over thousands of cases across 25 years, without ever losing his composure. Yet now his hand drifted toward the water glass, and when his fingertips touched the rim, the water began to tremble. That soft rippling sound spread through the silent courtroom. The trembling wouldn't stop. He couldn't speak. Sitting there in his robes at the bench, his eyes slowly reddened, and a single tear rolled down his cheek. No one understood. Not the prosecutor, not the defense. Not a single person in the gallery could comprehend why this judge had crumbled upon seeing a 23-year-old single mother's face. What could possibly have been in her face? This story begins 3 days before that moment, in the cold hours before dawn. Seo-yeon's day started not with crying, but with the sound of her baby struggling to breathe. Little Eun-woo lay gasping, each breath thin and broken, tiny whimpers escaping between labored inhales. The moment she opened her eyes, Seo-yeon rushed to him. His forehead burned even hotter than the night before, heat radiating against her palm, while his lips had gone dry and cracked. With trembling hands, she grabbed the formula container and shook it. The hollow rattle cut through the dawn silence. She shook it again, scraped her fingers along the bottom. But not a trace of powder remained. In the kitchen, the cabinet above the sink stood empty. The refrigerator held nothing but half a carton of milk, a week past its expiration date. She closed the door and sank slowly to the floor. A single 1,001 bill sat in her wallet, not enough for formula, not even enough for a small bottle of water. Eun-woo began fussing again. Not crying but gasping, thin whimpers threading through his cracked breathing. When she lifted him, his small body burned like fire against her chest. She had to feed him something now. Before the fever climbed higher, before his breathing grew worse, before this endless dawn passed if she couldn't feed him. She didn't know if he would survive the night. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through her contacts, until she saw the number saved as Mom. Her finger hovered there, frozen, as she remembered what she'd heard a year ago, when she revealed her pregnancy. Deal with it yourself. I don't know anything about this. The call had never connected since. Her father's number had been deleted long ago. He'd walked out when she was in middle school. She couldn't think of anyone she might call a friend after word of her pregnancy spread. Contacts had dropped away one by one. She set down the phone. At 23 years old, she had no one to turn to. Eun-woo's breathing grew rougher by the second. She pressed her hand to his forehead and closed her eyes, feeling the fever still climbing. There was no time left. It had to be now. She stood up and looked toward the window, where dawn light was just beginning to seep through the darkness. At the end of the alley, a convenience store sign glowed bright. Holding Eun-woo close, she opened the front door and stepped into the cold, At that same moment, on the opposite end of the alley, a man was leaving his house. Park Jun-ho, 58 years old, had served as a judge for 25 years. Every day he walked the same route at the same hour. A 20-minute stroll from home to the courthouse that passed a small bakery, where fresh bread filled the alley with its warm scent. Today, as always, he stopped in front of that bakery. A small bell chimed when he pushed open the glass door, and he picked up his usual loaf, paid, and stepped back outside. That's when he noticed someone approaching from the far end of the alley. A young woman carrying a baby, walking fast with her head down, so her face stayed hidden. In the dawn stillness, only the baby's faint, labored breathing reached his ears. He paused to watch. As she hurried past, something white tumbled from near her feet, a tiny baby shoe hitting the ground with a soft thud. White fabric embroidered with delicate flowers, smaller than his palm. "Excuse me," he called out, but she either didn't hear or couldn't stop moving, as though something was chasing her. He bent down, picked up the shoe, and felt its strange lightness in his hand. By the time he looked up, she had nearly reached the convenience store at the alley's end. He thought about calling out again but decided against it. Work was waiting. Instead, he placed the shoe on the bakery's windowsill, where sunlight could reach it, and told the owner, "If someone comes looking, please give this to them." The owner nodded, and Jun-ho continued on his way. But something nagged at him the entire walk to the courthouse. That image kept returning, the young woman with a baby in her arms, hurrying through the dawn alley in silence, and the small white shoe falling to the ground. He didn't know why. It just wouldn't leave his mind. The convenience store's automatic door slid open, greeting Seo Yeon with the cold hum of refrigerators and harsh fluorescent light. Holding Eun-woo, she made her way toward the back until she found the formula section. Rows of white containers lined up on the shelf. She stopped in front of them, reached out her hand, then froze when she saw the price tag. 28,000 won. She lowered her hand and looked to the side, where bottles of liquid formula sat on display. Small portable bottles, 3,500 won each. Even that was beyond her reach, yet she stood there for what felt like forever. Eun-woo whimpered softly in her arms, his breathing growing rougher, heat radiating from his forehead. Time was running out. Her hand moved again. Slowly, with trembling fingers, she picked up one bottle of liquid formula and slipped it into her pocket. Her heart slammed against her ribs as sweat slicked her palms. Keeping her head down, she walked to the register and used her last 1,001 bill to buy a small snack. She headed for the automatic door. 5 steps. 4. 3. Just a moment. Her feet stopped. The clerk's voice came from behind, and she turned slowly to face him. "Could you show me your bag?" She had no bag, only her pocket. The clerk's eyes moved to her jacket. "Your pocket, please." Her body went rigid. Eun-woo fussed in her arms, his thin cry spreading through the quiet store. Her eyes stung with rising tears. The clerk picked up his radio. "Yes, this is the convenience store. We have a shoplifter here." At that moment, the automatic door opened, and another customer walked in, an office worker on their morning commute. They saw Seo Yeon standing at the register. A young woman clutching a baby, head bowed, shoulders trembling. Their eyes fixed on her. She lowered her head further, wanting to hide her face, wanting to vanish from this place. If only the floor would split open and swallow her whole. But her feet refused to move. Minutes passed before a police car pulled up outside, red lights flashing through the glass without a siren. An officer stepped inside, and Seo Yeon couldn't bring herself to look up. She only held Eun-woo tighter. "You're Kim Seo Yeon, correct?" No answer came. "Let's head to the station together." His voice was surprisingly gentle, not harsh or aggressive, and somehow that made it worse. If he had yelled, she might have found something to push back against. That quiet kindness cut deeper than anger. She nodded and followed him out of the convenience store, the automatic door closing behind her with an echoing thud. Across the alley, the bakery window caught the early light, and something white sat on the sill, a small baby shoe. But she didn't see it. She climbed into the police car with her head still bowed. The door closed, and the car began to move. She held Eun-woo tight against her chest and refused to look out the window. She didn't want to see anything, didn't want to think about anything. She just wanted this moment to end. The interrogation room at the police station felt cold under its fluorescent lights. One old desk, 2 chairs, and a mirror on the wall that she knew wasn't really a mirror. Eun-woo had fallen asleep in her arms, his fever slightly lower now. On the way to the station, the officer had stopped at a pharmacy to buy fever reducer. And that small act of kindness weighed heavier than any accusation. The door creaked open and the same officer from the convenience store walked in. Looking about 5 or 6 years older than Seo Yeon, somewhere around 30. He pulled a chair to the opposite side of the desk, metal legs scraping against the floor. "I'm Officer Choi Min-sok." She gave only a slight bow of her head. He opened a file, picked up his pen, and studied her for a moment before speaking. "What about the baby's father?" Her hand flinched. "There isn't one." "You mean you can't reach him, or he never existed?" "He never existed." He paused, pen hovering over paper, and looked at her. She avoided his gaze by stroking Eun-woo's head, keeping her eyes down. "And your parents?" "I can't reach them." "Can't or won't?" She didn't answer. He let it go, writing something on the form, while the scratch of pen on paper filled the silence. After a moment, he opened a desk drawer and placed something in front of her, the bottle of liquid formula. The same one she'd hidden in her pocket. "This is worth 3,500 won. Normally, for an amount this small, you'd go through summary court, pay a fine of maybe a few tens of thousands of won and be done with it." Her shoulders relaxed slightly. "But," he continued, "looking at your situation, I don't think summary proceedings are the right path." She looked up, confused. "Request a formal trial." "What?" "Summary court means you pay a fine, it goes on your record, and that's the end. But a formal trial is different. The judge sees your circumstances firsthand." The words still weren't sinking in. "You're 23 years old, out at dawn, trying to steal formula for your baby. No family you can reach, 1,001 in your wallet. Is that really just theft?" Heat pricked at her eyes. "If the judge actually sees what you're going through, this might not end with just a fine. You could be connected to welfare services, referred for real support." He glanced at a photo frame on his desk, a picture of a child, and added quietly, "I know standing in a courtroom sounds terrifying. But in your situation, I think it's the better choice." She couldn't find words to respond. Wu shifted in her arms, his small fingers gripping her clothes. A formal trial? She finally managed. Yes. I'd have to stand in court? Yes. You'd explain your situation directly to the judge. Courtroom. Judge. Trial. The words pressed down on her chest like stones. But Officer Choi's question echoed louder. Is that really just theft? Slowly, she nodded. Okay. He wrote something more on the form. Then took an envelope from the drawer and set it before her. What's this? Formula powdered, not liquid. Take it when you leave. If you don't want it, that's fine too. She looked up at him. It's not from the station. I bought it myself. You don't have to accept it. She stared at the envelope, her lips trembling. Thank. Her throat closed before she could finish. Without another word, he stood and walked to the door, pausing to look back. I'll contact you when the trial date is set. You're free to go today. The door clicked shut. She sat there for a long time, staring at the formula in the envelope. Then down at Wu's sleeping face. A tear fell. Then another. She cried without making a sound. Her shoulders shaking as she swallowed each sob to keep from waking him. The interrogation room was silent, except for the faint hum of the fluorescent light overhead. 3 days later, the morning of her trial arrived. She woke before dawn, bathed Wu, and pulled the cleanest clothes she could find from her closet. Standing before the mirror to tie her hair, her fingers wouldn't stop trembling. The bus ride to the courthouse took an hour. Streets scrolled past the window, commuters heading to work, children walking to school, office workers carrying coffee. An ordinary morning for everyone except her. When she arrived at the courthouse, her legs refused to move. The gray building towered toward the sky, and the 2 characters carved above the entrance court had never seemed so heavy. Wu squirmed in her arms, his small hand gripping her collar. Looking down at that tiny hand, she drew a breath and forced herself to take the first step. The corridor stretched endlessly ahead, her footsteps echoing with each stride. Every time her heels struck the floor, her heart lurched. People passing by cast sideways glances at her, a young woman entering a courtroom with a baby in her arms. Their stares felt like weights pressing down on her, but she didn't stop. One step, then another, then another. When she reached the door of courtroom 3, her palms were slick with sweat. She gripped the cold metal handle, exhaled once, and pushed the door open. The hinges let out a long creak. The courtroom opened before her wooden walls. Rows of long benches, and at the front, the judge's bench rising high above everything else. It all felt foreign, and it all felt impossibly heavy. She walked to the defendant's stand, her footsteps echoing through the quiet space. A few people sat scattered in the gallery, and she felt every one of their eyes as she lowered her head. She took her place and stood there, clutching Wu to her chest, unable to look up. Proceeding with the next case. A voice came from the bench, low, steady, firm. Papers rustled. Defendant, Kim Seo-yeon. Slowly, she raised her head. The judge sat at the bench. A man in black robes who appeared to be in his late 50s. After calling her name while reading from his documents, he lifted his gaze. Their eyes met. His expression froze. His fingers stopped mid-page, suspended in the air. Every sound in the courtroom died away in an instant. Why is he looking at me like that? She couldn't understand. The judge was staring at her, no, not just staring. He was transfixed, as though he'd seen a ghost. His pupils trembled visibly. Is there something on my face? She had no idea. Defendant, the clerk called. Please confirm your identity. Her voice cracked as she answered. Yes. I'm Kim Seo-yeon. At that moment, the judge's hand drifted toward his water glass. And when his fingertips touched the rim, the water inside began to ripple. That small sloshing sound spread through the silent courtroom, soft but unmistakable. Why is he looking at me that way? She still couldn't comprehend it. The judge's eyes were reddening. Still seated at the bench, still wearing his robes. This man who enforced the nation's laws had tears welling in his eyes. Her chest tightened as confusion flooded through her. The courtroom had gone completely still, not the prosecutor. Not the clerk, not a single person in the gallery dared to speak. The judge slowly closed his eyes and covered them with one hand. His shoulders stiffened almost imperceptibly. He was fighting something down, holding back whatever threatened to break through with everything he had. Time itself seemed to stop. Woo stirred softly in her arms. And the only sound in the courtroom was his quiet breathing. Why is this man crying when he looks at me? She couldn't find an answer. After what felt like an eternity. The judge lowered his hand and wiped his eyes, struggling to steady his voice. A moment, he said, his throat tight. Court is in recess. The words barely left his mouth before he rose from his seat. His robes rustling as he walked wordlessly toward the back door. It opened, then closed behind him. Silence reclaimed the courtroom. She stood frozen at the defendant's stand, unable to process what had just happened. Her arms only tightened around Woo. Why did that judge cry when he saw me? The question circled endlessly without an answer. Footsteps faded somewhere beyond the courtroom walls, growing fainter. Until a distant door closed with a muffled thud. 10 minutes later, court resumed. The back door opened and robes rustled once more. As the judge returned to the bench. He was different now, his expression set hard, wiped clean of emotion. She watched him from the defendant's stand. The redness around his eyes had vanished, as though nothing had happened. But the water glass was gone. The bench sat empty where it had been. Court will resume. His voice was steady now, low, calm, unwavering. Defendant Kim Seo-yeon, you are charged with theft. Papers shuffled. The charge is theft of 1 bottle of liquid formula, valued at 3,500 won, from a convenience store. Defendant, do you admit to the charges? Her voice wouldn't come. She parted her lips, felt them tremble, and forced the words out. Yes, I admit it. The judge looked down at his papers as silence settled over the room. Broken only by the soft clicking of the clerk's keyboard. I will hear the defendant's statement. Please describe the circumstances at the time of the offense. She drew a breath, unsure where to begin. Woo's fever, the empty formula container. The single 1,001 bill in her wallet, the dawn with no one to call. Where could she possibly start? My baby was sick. Her voice shook. He had a fever, and there was no formula. No money either. It was the middle of the night, and I had no one to contact. The judge didn't look up, his eyes fixed on the documents. Was there a reason you didn't contact friends or family? The word family drove into her chest like a nail. There's no one. By no one, do you mean you don't have contact information? I have no family to contact." His pen stopped. Just for a moment, so brief it was almost invisible, but she saw it. His hand had stiffened. "I see." He closed the file. The courtroom went quiet as everyone waited for the verdict. The judge spoke. "Defendant Kim Seo-yeon." His voice was low but steady. "The law is the law." Her heart sank. Regardless of circumstances, taking another person's property without permission is a crime. Before the law, circumstances may be considered in mitigation, but they cannot serve as grounds for absolution. Her vision blurred. "Of course. What did I expect?" The judge cried. "So what? The law is the law." However, he continued, considering the defendant's current situation, the motive for the offense, and the fact that this is a first offense, "I render the following sentence." She held her breath. "A fine of 300,000 won." Her head lifted. "If you are unable to pay the fine, labor detention may be substituted with community service. You will receive guidance on this from the relevant agency." 300,000 won. Not prison. Not detention. A fine. Her legs nearly gave way beneath her. "Additionally," he said, "given the defendant's circumstances, I will request referral to the local welfare agency. While the court cannot provide direct assistance, I will arrange for you to receive the support you need." The words barely registered through the fog in her mind. Fine. 300,000 won. Welfare referral. The words scattered and drifted. "Defendant, do you understand?" She managed a nod. Her voice wouldn't come. "This concludes the sentencing." The gavel rose. The sharp crack of wood on wood echoed through the courtroom, and it was over. "Please prepare the next case." The clerk began organizing papers, while people in the gallery stood and murmured among themselves. She remained standing there as Woo shifted in her arms, his small hand clutching her collar. She looked down at that tiny hand. "It's over. It's really over." Her knees threatened to buckle, but she held on. She had to, for Woo. She walked toward the courtroom door, one step at a time. Part of her wanted to look back. She didn't know why, but she kept her eyes forward. She pressed her hand to the door and pushed. It opened, then closed behind her. The heavy thud echoed through the silent courtroom. From the judge's bench, Park Jun-ho heard that sound, the door closing, footsteps fading, and then the return of silence. The file for the next case lay before him, but his hands wouldn't move. The words on the page blurred into nothing. Kim Seo-yeon. The name circled endlessly through his mind. "Your Honor." The clerk's voice broke through. "The next case is ready." He knew he should respond, but no words would come. "Your Honor? That's all for today." The clerk looked up in surprise. "But there are still 3 cases remaining. Postpone them to next week." He didn't rise from his seat. He simply sat there. After a moment's hesitation, the clerk quietly gathered their things. One by one, people filed out: the prosecutor, the clerk, the spectators. Footsteps faded. Doors closed. He was alone in the courtroom. Still seated at the bench, he stared at the defendant's stand where she had been standing only moments ago. Silence. The fluorescent lights hummed faintly overhead. Nothing else. He didn't know how long he sat there. He closed his eyes as something swelled up from deep within his chest, something he had kept buried for 25 years. He covered his face with his hands. His shoulders shook. He made no sound, jaw clenched tight. But the tears wouldn't stop. They slipped through his fingers, soaking his sleeves, dropping onto the bench. Why do I fall apart when I see her? He thought he knew the answer. But he couldn't bring himself to believe it. The courtroom stood empty around him as he wept in silence. That night, he didn't go home. He sat at his office computer, a search bar glowing on the screen. He tried to type the name Kim Seo-yeon, but his trembling fingers stopped short. He wanted to know, yet dreaded knowing. His phone rang. His wife Jung Mi-kyung. He stared at her name on the screen before answering. Honey, what about dinner? I'll be late tonight. Is something wrong? His voice wouldn't come. How could he explain? The woman I saw in court today. The eyes that look just like yours. How do you say something like that? It's nothing. Just behind on some work. All right, don't stay too late. The call ended. He turned back to the screen and typed into the search bar Sabom Orphanage. He pressed enter and scanned the results address, contact information, founding year. He scrolled through the information. Then took out a notepad and wrote down the address. The next morning, he filed for leave at the courthouse vacation days. He hadn't touched once in 25 years. The clerk asked what was going on, but he offered no explanation. He drove for an hour, leaving the city behind as buildings grew shorter and roads narrower. The navigation announced his arrival. Sabom Orphanage. An old building stood before him, paint peeling from the walls, a rusted iron gate. Weathered playground equipment scattered across the yard. He stepped out of the car and pushed open the gate, which groaned in protest. His footsteps echoed through the quiet morning air. As he crossed the yard toward the entrance, he knocked. After a moment, the door opened to reveal a woman in her 60s. With white hair and deep wrinkles, though her eyes remained sharp. Can I help you? I'm looking for records from 25 years ago. Her eyes flickered with something unreadable. Records? A child was brought here 25 years ago. I need to find her. The woman studied him from head to toe before stepping aside. Come in. The office was cramped, one old desk, filing cabinets lining the walls. The air smelled of dust and aged paper. The woman stood before a cabinet. 25 years ago, you said? Yes. And the name? He paused, then spoke carefully. Kim Seo-yeon. Or possibly just Seo-yeon. Her hand froze on the cabinet handle. She turned to look at him, something shifting in her expression. Seo-yeon? You recognize the name? Without answering, she opened the cabinet and began rifling through stacks of documents. Old papers rustled under her fingers. After a long search, she pulled out a single sheet and placed it on the desk. If this is who you mean. He looked down at the paper, a thin, yellowed document covered in handwritten notes. Date of admission March 15, 2000. Estimated age 7 days. Location found alley in front of orphanage. Belongings at discovery 1 pair of white baby shoes. Name Kim Seo-yeon, assigned by orphanage. His hands began to tremble. March 15, 2000. That day. That exact day. The belongings when she was found. White baby shoes, the woman said. I heard crying in the alley at dawn. When I went out, there was a baby, wrapped in a blanket, and beside her lay a pair of small white shoes. His vision blurred. White shoes. Mi-kyung had embroidered them herself, tiny flowers stitched into the fabric. She'd made them before their daughter was born. Put them on her feet at the hospital, and then that night, they vanished along with the child. Do you still have those shoes? I kept them, in case the parents ever came. She returned to the cabinet and retrieved a small box from the back. When she lifted the lid, there they were, white fabric, embroidered with delicate flowers, smaller than his palm. One pair. He picked them up. They felt impossibly light in his hands. Exactly as they had been 25 years ago. The color had faded slightly, but the flower pattern remained. Mi Kyung had stayed up all night, embroidering them, stitch by stitch, dreaming of the child about to be born. 3 days later, everything was gone. Are you, the woman asked gently, her father? He couldn't answer. He just stood there holding the shoes, hands shaking, vision swimming. 25 years of searching. Every birthday, they lit candles. They never stopped believing she would come home. And she had stood in his courtroom as a defendant. A thief. A single mother who stole formula. This child, he managed, his voice breaking. How did she grow up? The woman's face darkened. Not well. What do you mean? There were problems at her adoptive homes. She kept coming back. Eventually, the year she turned 18, she just left. He closed his eyes. And after that? Nothing. No word from her. Then a few months ago, she reached out. Said she'd had a baby, asked if we could help. But we didn't have the resources. Her voice trailed off. He stood in silence, his grip tightening on the shoes. For 25 years, his daughter had been alone. Abandoned, adrift, wounded. And in the end, she'd stolen a bottle of formula to feed her own child. These shoes, he said. May I take them? The woman looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. Take them. He pressed the shoes to his chest back in his hands after 25 years. They had belonged to his daughter, had been placed on her feet the day she was born. Had disappeared with her that night. He walked out through the yard, pushed open the creaking gate, and stood beside his car, looking up at the sky. Clear and blue. Not a single cloud. Why is the sky so clear? Why does the world keep turning as if nothing happened? He didn't get in the car. He stood there for a long time, clutching the shoes, eyes closed. What do I do now? What do I tell Mi Kyung? How do I even begin to approach Seo Yeon? There were no answers. But one thing was certain: he had found her. After 25 years, he had found his daughter. Several days passed. Jun Ho tracked down Seo Yeon's address through the court records, an old studio building on the outskirts of the city, 30 minutes by car. He told Mi Kyung everything: the woman he'd seen in court, the records at the orphanage, the white shoes. The moment Mi Kyung saw them, she collapsed to the floor, hands pressed to her mouth, crying without a sound. You found her? I think so. Really? Our Seo Yeon. Mi Kyung's hands trembled as she held the shoes she had embroidered. 25 years ago. We need to see her, Jun Ho said. Together. Let's go together. The next morning, they got in the car. Jun Ho drove while Mi Kyung sat in the passenger seat, the shoes resting in her lap. Neither spoke. There was nothing they could say. They were on their way to meet their daughter after 25 years. And neither knew where to begin. 30 minutes later, they arrived at the building. Paint peeling from the walls. Rusted stairs, laundry strung across the corridors. Mi Kyung bit her lip as she looked up at it. Jun Ho took her hand. Let's go. They climbed the stairs, each step clanging against the old metal. Third floor, room 302. They stood before the door. His hand hesitated over the doorbell. What should he say? How should he start? That they'd been searching for 25 years? That they were sorry? What good would any of it do? Mi Kyung reached past him and pressed the button. The chime echoed inside. A baby's cry followed, then footsteps, then the click of a lock. The door swung open. Seo Yeon stood there. She held Eun Woo in her arms, dark circles under her eyes, hair unkempt. The moment she saw who was at her door, her expression hardened. The judge. The one who had cried looking at her in court. And beside him, a woman she didn't recognize. What is this? Her voice came out sharp. Why are you here? More fines? Is it not okay if I refuse that welfare thing? Jun Ho's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Every word he'd prepared had vanished. Mi Kyung stepped forward, holding out the shoes. Do you remember these? Seo Yeon's eyes dropped to the shoes' white fabric, tiny embroidered flowers, smaller than a palm. They looked familiar somehow, but she couldn't place them. What is this? We put these on you the day you were born. Her eyes wavered. What? 25 years ago, on the third night after your birth. Someone took you from us. She stepped back. What are you talking about? You're our daughter. Silence hung in the air. She looked from one to the other, the judge and the woman beside him, her face a mask of disbelief. Are you insane? Her voice shook. Your daughter? Lost 25 years ago? Seo Yeon. Mi Kyung tried to step closer, but Seo Yeon raised her hand. Don't call me that. Her voice rang through the corridor. Eun Woo startled and began to cry. I was abandoned, left at an orphanage. No one ever came looking, not once in 25 years. Tears streamed down Mi Kyung's face. We looked. We never stopped. Police reports, flyers, every single birthday. So what? Seo Yeon cut her off. So what if you looked? What am I supposed to do with that now? Jun Ho stood speechless. Rage burned in Seo Yeon's eyes. But beneath it lay something deeper, 25 years of accumulated pain. I was sent to adoptive homes and returned, again and again. When I turned 18, I left on my own. Completely alone. No one. And now you show up claiming to be my parents? Where were you for 25 years? Mi Kyung answered through her tears. We searched. Even after the police closed the case, we never gave up. Every birthday, we lit candles, believing you'd come back to us. What good are candles? Her voice echoed through the corridor. What good is praying? While you were lighting candles, I was starving. I was beaten. I was thrown away. While you prayed, I wanted to die. Mi Kyung dropped to her knees. Jun Ho slowly knelt beside her. Seo Yeon looked down at them, her breathing ragged, her chest ready to burst. Why now? Her voice cracked. Why did you have to show up now? Jun Ho bowed his head. I'm sorry. Just those 2 words. I'm sorry we couldn't protect you. That we couldn't find you. That we did nothing while you suffered. Mi Kyung wept in silence. We searched for 25 years. But what does that matter? Nothing can undo what you went through. Jun Ho continued, his voice breaking. I'm a judge. For 25 years, I've sat in courtrooms, passing judgment on other people's lives. But I couldn't protect my own daughter. I handed down a sentence in that courtroom, without even knowing the defendant was my child. His hands trembled. I judged people's lives by the law, and I must have ruined some of them. People destroyed by verdicts I handed down. And through all of it, I had no idea what was happening to my own daughter. That's who I am. That's what my 25 years have been. Seo Yian couldn't speak. I won't make excuses. I won't ask you to forgive us. I just need you to know one thing: we didn't abandon you. Mi Kyung pressed her hands against the floor. The day you were born. The moment I first held you. I was the happiest I'd ever been. And when we lost you, I thought the world had ended. Tears fell from Seo Yian's eyes. So did I. Her voice splintered. Every single day, I thought the world had ended. Wu cried in her arms. She looked down at his small face, his tiny fingers clutching her clothes. After I had this baby, she said, for the first time, I wanted to live. For him. Even if I had to do it alone. Mi Kyung lifted her head. You're not alone. Seo Yian said nothing. You're not alone anymore. We're here. Her shoulders began to shake. She tried to hold back, jaw clenched tight. But she couldn't. She broke. Silent sobs racked her body as her shoulders heaved. Standing in that doorway with Wu in her arms. 25 years of everything came pouring out. Mi Kyung rose and wrapped her arms around Seo Yian. Jun Ho stood and embraced them both. The three of them cried without sound in that narrow corridor. Holding each other for a long, long time. Only Wu had stopped crying, breathing quietly among them. A year passed. Jun Ho retired from the bench, setting down 25 years of judicial work. He had regrets, of course he did, but now his time belonged somewhere else. Seo Yian moved in with her parents. At first, everything felt awkward. 25 years of separation couldn't be bridged overnight. Getting to know each other took time. There were clashes, stretches of silence. But every morning, she sat at the table Mi Kyung had prepared. Every evening, Jun Ho lifted Wu into his arms. Small moments accumulated, day by day. That was how they became a family. One evening in spring, Jun Ho sat in the yard, looking up at the sky. The sun was setting, painting everything in shades of red and gold. Laughter drifted from inside Seo Yian and Mi Kyung. Cooking together in the kitchen. Pot lids clanked, knives tapped against cutting boards. And between it all came the sound of their voices, light and warm. Wu toddled around the living room in his walker, babbling happily. A year ago, he couldn't have imagined this. Mi Kyung opened the door and stepped outside. Honey, dinner's ready. Jun Ho nodded and started to rise, but Seo Yian came out carrying Wu. She held the baby out to him. Dad, hold him. Dad. The word reached his ears. He had never heard it before, not from her. The first time she had ever called him that. He took Wu into his arms. Small hands reached up to touch his cheek. A giggle bubbled up. Tears came. Jun Ho laughed and cried at the same time. Let's go eat, Seo Yian said. The four of them went inside together, and the door closed behind them. Only the evening light remained in the yard, red slowly fading to dusk. Somewhere, a bird sang. The world was quiet. Jun Ho thought to himself, 25 years of searching. And finally, finding her. He had believed it was too late, that too much time had been lost. But looking at this evening, he realized there was still time left. Time to be together. Even in that moment when he'd thought it was too late. Time had kept moving forward. This was only the beginning. If today's story brought you even a little comfort, please consider subscribing, liking the video, and turning on notifications. It truly means a lot. And if you leave a warm greeting in the comments, I sincerely wish that good fortune will always be with you. Thank you.